Hey everyone, welcome to another video on YouTube channel of tutorialspedia.com. In this video, I'll talk about SOAP web services interview questions and answers. Despite the fact that most of the companies and most of the integration projects which are being developed recently are shifted towards REST web services, but still SOAP continues to have its presence, and SOAP is one of the hottest area when it comes to the implementation of web services and when it comes to the interviews that are conducted for software developers and integration professionals. Before I proceed with the questions and answers specific to SOAP web services, I will request you to please subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed before, so that you are able to get latest videos when they are uploaded. So the first and a very basic question that is asked regarding the SOAP web services in any interview, be it at the beginner level or even sometimes at the advanced level, is that what is exactly SOAP? SOAP, which stands for Simple Object Access Protocol, is a messaging protocol which relies on application level protocols like HTTP or HTTPS, JMS, SMTP, etc. to enable client server communication. And all the communication that is done using SOAP web services is based on XML, and XML format is used in the request and response. So this is a very simple question and a basic question that is asked just to understand that what is your know-how about a SOAP and how it is used. The next question that is sometimes asked about SOAP web services in any interview at the beginner level as well as at the advanced level is that what are the elements of a SOAP message? A SOAP XML message consists of following elements. It contains envelope, which acts as an identifier for XML as a SOAP message. And this is a mandatory element for any SOAP message. Without an envelope, your XML message will not be considered as a valid SOAP message. Then we have header, which contains any additional information which we want to pass in the header in the request or response. Header element is optional, and it's not always available in a SOAP message. The third element, which is the main or the core element, is the body element, which contains actual content of the request or response message. And this is a mandatory element. Whatever request or response you pass from the client to the server and from server to the client is included in the body element of the XML message of SOAP request and response respectively. And then we have fault element, which is available only in case of fault response, and it is nested under the body element as a child. So you will see a fault only in the response whenever there is something wrong, and server wants to send a fault message to the client to inform the client about the problem that has been faced at the server side for the request that was initiated from the client side. Next important question which is asked regarding SOAP web services in the interviews is that what are the major elements of a WSDL? And sometimes before asking this question that what are the elements of a WSDL, you might face a question what exactly a WSDL is and why it is used for. But that's a very beginner level and a simple question, so I have covered only the elements level question for the WSDL. So the major elements of a WSDL are types, which defines XML schema and data types used for the service operation. And these types exist only in case of a document style WSDL, not for a RPC style WSDL. The next element is message, which defines request and response, and also we can have a fault message for the fault responses that will be sent from the server to the client. And we have port type, which defines all the operations available as part of the SOAP web service. So this port type will act as an interface which is containing all the operations which are part of that WSDL. And then we have binding, which defines protocol and data format specifications. So collectively, all these things, if you open any XML format WSDL file, you will see these elements structured within that WSDL file. And when we talk about these different elements, the messages that are defining the request and response, they refer to certain elements or XST elements which defines what are the inputs and what are the outputs for any operation. Next interview question, which is quite commonly asked for any integration related interview, or even for any application development interview as a software developer, that what is the difference between an abstract WSDL and a concrete WSDL. An abstract WSDL contains information about web service operations, associated messages, and data types, but it does not contain any transport or binding information, and it is used on the server side to implement the web service operations using top-down approach. So you can consider it as a blueprint of your web service, and then you implement on top of it using this abstract WSDL. It just defines what functionalities a web service has, but it doesn't provide any information that how to contract it and how to consume this web service. On the other hand, when we talk about a concrete WSDL, a concrete WSDL contains all information as an abstract include which are in the abstract WSDL, and on top of that, it also contains transport and binding details so that a client is able to invoke the web service operation using the specified transport details. There is a typo here. It's concrete WSDL, not a contract WSDL. So if you are a client and if you want to consume some web service which is exposed by someone on the server side, you will be requiring a concrete WSDL, not an abstract WSDL. But on the other end, if you are developing, if you are going to develop a web service on the server side, and you want to use a top-down approach, then you will first create an abstract WSDL, and using that abstract WSDL, you will do all the implementation, and finally, we will expose your sub-service, and you will provide a concrete WSDL for the clients to invoke the web service operations. The next important question that is quite commonly asked in the interviews is that what are the advantages of using a SOAP web service? SOAP web services are application level protocol neutral, and they support multiple type of application level protocols, and this is one of the good thing and a positive feature of SOAP web services. You can use HTTP, you can switch to HTTPS to make it a secure web service. You can use JMS, you can use SMTP. So from the TCP IP stack, you can use different protocols available on the application level. And with XML as its core, SOAP provides a greater level of control over data types, formats by utilizing the XML related standards. Since it's XML, so any of the specifications which are part of XML standards, you can utilize those. For example, when you are implementing your web service, you can utilize regular expressions, you can use enumerations, you can have any other type of specific restrictions at your element level. So all the good things and all the great features that are part of standard XML, you can utilize those when you're implementing your SOAP web services which are XML based. And the next advantage of SOAP web service is that with all service details, service contracts, and data models well defined using a WSDL file, it becomes much convenient and easier for clients to consume SOAP operation with any payload discrepancies identified at the client side. So when you expose a SOAP web service and you provide a WSDL to the client, if client is using that WSDL and trying to invoke any of the operations, many of the mistakes that client does will be identified at the client level itself. For example, if he is missing any elements, for example, using a SOAP UI, if he misses any of the elements from the request, he will know exactly there, and many such errors will be identified and discrepancies will be identified at the client level. And secondly, since everything is well defined in your WSDL, so most of the tools that are used to create the classes or create the client's stubs from the WSDL, they automatically take into consideration all of the required elements, all of the dependencies, and that way it becomes quite convenient for the client side to invoke those web service operations. And when it comes to the advantages of a SOAP web service, there are certain disadvantages also associated. As you know, any of the technologies that we are using has certain pros and certain cons. So we need to take into consideration both pros and cons. So same is the case for a SOAP web service, that there are certain disadvantages as well associated with SOAP. The first thing is that SOAP is considered to be slower compared to REST web service due to larger payload size. As I explained in one of the previous question, that when it comes to SOAP payloads, you have so many elements in XML format. With in XML you have tags, opening tags, ending. So a lot of things are associated. You have envelopes, you have header, and all these things collectively make the payload size quite bigger. So that becomes slower compared to the REST web services. And second thing is that SOAP is purely based on XML and it doesn't support JSON. Nowadays, JSON is considered as very popular uh, type of communication, and most of the web services nowadays use JSON data format. But if you're using SOAP, you will have to rely on XML. And the third thing is that due to contract specifications, there is a tight coupling between client and server, making it hard to change. As you create a web service, you define in every element, all operations and associated elements in a WSDL. Now it becomes very tightly coupled with the WSDL. So if you share that WSDL with a client, and if you have to make any changes, then those changes must be reflected in the new WSDL, and the client side will have to import the new WSDL and make the changes accordingly. So this is something which becomes a overhead and makes it difficult to make any changes, and becomes quite tightly coupled with the WSDL specifications. The next possible potential disadvantage of SOAP web service is that SOAP relies on specific client application and it doesn't have a standard browser support, contrary to REST. As if you have a REST web service, any client can simply even try from the browser as well if it's a GET method. And they have many other tools like they can use Postman and stuff like that. But when it comes to SOAP, you will have to rely on some more dedicated, specifically SOAP specific tools to work as a client. For example, you have to use SOAP UI, or if you have to use your application, you will have to create the client in your specific language, for example, Java or .NET, and only then you can consume those web services. So this becomes comparatively a bit of a overhead when it comes to a comparison with the REST web services. Next interview question, which is quite commonly asked, is that what is the difference between RPC and document style SOAP web services? So in case of RPC, remote procedure call style, WSDL is generated based on the operation names and associated parameters without type definition in the WSDL document. And in this case, you will have your method name also going on in the request. And on the other end, document style contains types in the WSDL and can be validated against predefined schema. Nowadays, document style WSDL with literal format is quite popular, and in the document style you have better control over the validation against any predefined schema. And in this case, you will see a difference in your WSDL file as well, where you will have types, and inside the types you will have the associated schemas well defined. So that's it from this video on some of the important interview questions related to SOAP web services. I hope that this video will help you to grasp some of the concepts and to understand the nature of the types of questions that are being asked for any integration professional or any software engineer for the interviews which relate to the web services. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you are able to get latest videos. Thank you very much.